This is our discussion in Human Resource Management for Chapter 3. This is our introduction to the workforce and how we define jobs and basically analyze the workforce through job descriptions and job definitions. And ultimately, how can we improve retaining workers that we want? I do want to go back, though, in Chapter 1 on page 16 and review what the book talks about regarding jobs audit. I think perhaps the jobs audit should be in this chapter, but let's just tie them together now. The jobs audit is not the same as a workforce analysis. A jobs audit does basically run through what jobs are available, what jobs we have defined, descriptions of those jobs, and we would rank them in terms of their priority, their essential nature, who's performing, how they report, what is their hierarchy as to who their managers are, a basic outline of what is needed to know how the skills are applied, and any abilities that are needed in those particular jobs. It is not a on-the-ground kind of audit. It is merely one done with the records that an HR office might have. And to get down to the reality of that job, though, we would need to bring in a different approach, which would be the workforce analysis. And this is where Chapter 3 can, I think, begin. Workforce analysis is a great deal of work, but it does a great deal of good. It is a very positive approach for most firms, because what the firm is looking for is basically where does that work flow? Where does that work come from? Is there a way that we can determine if people are capable physically? How do the skills in the job description fit the skills of the laborer? There's all sorts of ways that we want to then look at the nature of the work in a workforce analysis. The goals coming out of the workforce analysis of what is that flow are basically looking at the possible redesign of a job, and with that in mind, fitting that job to the right person. There's also another aspect, which is in later chapters, which allows HR to use the job design after a redesign to improve incentives. So we'll learn about pay and compensation and other benefits, but we can tie it right now back into what we're doing within the workforce analysis. In other words, once we have a better design of a job, it might be that the company wants to incentivize those workers better. Again, another chapter coming to us. One thing I want to mention is the concern most companies have of getting accurate data. So as you're looking at what are the tasks, duties, responsibilities in a job, and in fact who's doing them, how is it done, by interviewing, by asking supervisors, there's all sorts of problems with who is doing the analysis, who is gathering the data, how is it gathered? If it's done from an HR level, it might be that workers are not reporting. Surveys are notorious for lack of participation. If the company asks the supervisors to provide the data, it could be that an individual line manager, for instance, doesn't really want to do this, isn't participating completely, and so your data can be skewed. Just be careful of that in terms of who is on the job design redesign team, who's gathering that information from the workforce analysis. I know that most workers fear, though, job analysis or workforce analysis, because implicit in a job design or a job redesign is the possibility of layoffs or lateral movements, which is not often a career choice for workers. So I think in this area, HR really does have to be careful about who it chooses to be on the team, that focuses on the job design, or in a sense the workforce analysis that comes from that project.